You're listening to Sweet Life, the show that helps you find and walk your own special path. I'm Brooke Peterson. Here on Sweet Life, we like to explore unconventional career possibilities, self-discovery, professional development, and more. Whatever helps and whatever works to make it sweet. Our first guest, I love this quote from the late, great Roger Ebert. It's not what a movie is about. It's how it is about it. I love film. I love talking about film. I love feeling a film, analyzing a film, savoring a film. I love watching a film the second time because I always love it more, even if I didn't really love it the first time. I remember growing up and being absolutely addicted to American movie classics, AMC. Katharine Hepburn became my idol. Cary Grant became my ideal, and I swear those movies prevented me from acquiring a really thick Southern accent. People are always surprised when I say I'm from South Carolina, and I say I watched a lot of classic movies growing up, and they think I'm kidding. Anyway, I'm not. As this is the last Sweet Life for a little bit of time, I decided to indulge myself by focusing this segment on a personal interest of mine, classic film restoration, keeping the classics alive. Tom Burton is the Executive Director of Restoration Services at Technicolor and has been so for 9 years. He has recently restored film classics such as To Kill a Mockingbird, Le Voyage Dans La Lune. That's the really cool one. That was the focus of Hugo, the movie with the moon and the rocket ship going into its eye. You know, the iconic picture. That's actually a real film, folks. And they restored it. And one of my all-time favorites, the other Hepburn, Breakfast at Tiffany's. Thank you for joining us, Tom Burton.
Hey, thanks, Brooke. Pleasure to be with you today.
Okay, so let's just get going. Tell us, you have been at Technicolor for 9 years, and you developed this restoration services department. Backing up to the beginning of your career, what is your educational background? How did you get where you are?
Well, it's funny. I guess I've always kind of been involved in the art and frame by frame business. I originally was a painting major. Actually, my undergraduate work is in fine arts. I was a painter with a second degree in filmmaking, and this is early days of filmmaking. Our entire department at Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois, Missouri Valley Conference, thank you very much. Our film department consisted of two 16-millimeter Bolex cameras and a glue splicer, and that was kind of what we had. So from that, here we are today. So
now, did you? That's a great combination, though, and it makes perfect sense to how you ended up where you are.
Yeah, it does.
So now, did you originally go there with the intention of being a painter artist or a filmmaker?
Yeah, originally it was actually commercial art was my original thought. For some weird reason, I guess I thought I wanted to join the world of Mad Men and do the advertising culture and do corporate art, but that quickly ended during the hippie days of painting in the late '60s, early '70s, and I got involved in filmmaking, photography, and filmmaking as an offshoot of that, and that's really where the diversion happened, and I ended up going to UCLA graduate school in filmmaking, and then discovered, wait a minute, filmmaking is also animation, which is also painting. Oh, my God, close the loop. So it was by saying Circle of Life, and everything was, even before it was composed. But that's kind of where all the history came from.
Nice. And so it was basically just by going to film school and discovering what all film entails that you sort of put the two pieces together.
Yeah, exactly.
And what was the first film you restored?
Well, the first actual full restoration title, we did a lot of remastering here before we really powered up the department as a full-blown image restoration and preservation department. But the first title that we did on a big scale, and it was quite a big scale, was The Little Mermaid for Disney. Oh. And that was, that was probably 8 years ago, maybe.
But no, The Little Mermaid isn't really even that old.
No, 80s. But you'd be amazed, and it's. I think that's part of the challenge that we all run into is that these film assets, are somewhat vulnerable, and even a show that recent has some significant damage in it, oddly, in the stored elements.
I did not expect you to say The Little Mermaid.
I know. Well, there you go.
Now, you mentioned remastering. So I in my little bit of research that I've done, I found image restoration versus remastering versus preservation versus laser recording. So first of all, what is remastering and how is that different?
Well, going through the sequence of events, I would say there's remastering usually refers to usually a studio-driven project where the idea is to remonetize that asset, that intellectual property, in a new DVD or Blu-ray release or some new broadcast application or some streaming application. So remastering in itself really simply refers to taking a library asset and putting it in some new condition, upgrading it, and re-releasing it in a new format. So that's how remastering sort of separates from image restoration. Full restoration could be a leap beyond that, where the goal is not just to take that asset out of the vault, digitize it and make a new Blu-ray, but it speaks to the need to actually repair or regenerate those master elements which are in the vault. So that could be anything from creating new film assets, oddly enough, even in this day of diminishing film, or it means creating very robust and future-looking digital assets so you're kind of doing that as a step, and you're going to all of the steps to clean up all of the image blemishes and torn perforations and dirt and scratches, replace those missing frames that have never been there, and that's really restoration. Preservation, on the other hand, in going down the step, relates to the long-term storage and preservation of those image assets for whatever future use. And that can mean that data. It can mean that, although we all know data is pretty vulnerable these days, we'll talk about that, but it can also mean making those film assets, but it can also mean making things like YCM assets, which is a very esoteric form of preservation that relates to, now speaking about color films, it talks about breaking the color film down into its essential records, yellow, cyan, and magenta, and recording those separate records out. It's like taking the comic book apart and taking those different screen printings out of the color and saving them as black and white records on very robust long-term black and white film, which lasts a whole lot longer than color. And in a way, that YCM process is like original Technicolor in reverse, because original Technicolor was shot as black and white, which people may not know, was shot as 3 individual strips of black and white film, each with a red, green, and blue filter in front of it. And then those images were printed back almost like a book printing process onto film. This YCM process is sort of the reverse of that, and we do it for even very modern films. So
really?
That was a long-winded explanation. Sorry.
And maybe in there I missed it, but why do you have to do that? What does that do?
Well, the preserving, the ultimate preservation, data is probably our most vulnerable asset. We've all had hard drives crash. We've all lost computers. We've all put in a thumb drive and it says, sorry, can't boot. That data may metaphysically still live there, but unfortunately that physical medium it's living on has just died. And so while we face the conundrum of how to archive things going forward as data, one of the sure things that we know is that black and white film will last for hundreds of years if properly stored.
Really?
Absolutely. And so we take new movies, oddly, like Spielberg's Lincoln, for example, and we take that brand new digital gorgeous data and we take a trip into the Wayback Machine and we put that on black and white film broken down into its essential color records, and that, we know, stored in humidity and temperature-controlled environments, in vaults, will last for hundreds of years. So that's an interesting sort of unintuitive part of how we
but only the black and white
future.
Only the black and white film is so sturdy. When you add the color, it sort of breaks it down and makes it more fragile or something.
Well, it's the color dyes,
Okay.
the things that make the film color. Those dyes are what are fragile and subject to fading and shifting in their stability. So that's getting better all the time, of course. But here we are as it gets better, and now we're done with film. So film is, as your listeners may or may not know, film is on the brink of being ceased as a medium. On all levels.
Does that make you cringe?
Very shortly.
Is there something in your heart that just sort of breaks a little bit when you hear that?
There is, but it's a sentimentality that is irrelevant because there's nothing that's going to change it. So it's like, get over it. We all die.
Fair enough. I'm very sentimental.
So much for the Fountain of Youth. Nice story. Let's move on. And that's kind of where we have to be with this. There are very few people today, very few directors. Chris Nolan may be one of the few exceptions. These guys that's shooting the Batman movies, directing Batman, who still insists on have everything be film as long as he can possibly do it. Mm-hmm. Most production is moving away from film very, very rapidly. So it's important that these assets, these black and white assets, get preserved for the future, because that's still, oddly, the best way to preserve them. Okay.
Now, as far as film restoration, you mentioned scratches and missing frames, and I can't even, what do you do with missing frames? You can't, go back and do some pickups on the film set.
That's right. Well, there is the Wayback Machine. I did mention that.
I want one of these Wayback Machines you keep talking about.
Peabody and Sherman are part of our process. Sorry, I went off on a theory. You're talking about missing frames. There are several ways, actually, to deal with that, and it happens often for various reasons. When we go back to restore a title, if we have the luxury of going back, which we always try to do, to go back to the most nascent form of that film, we'll go back to the original camera negative, if at all possible, and in many cases, even movies like Sunset Boulevard, which we restored recently, those nitrate film elements, unfortunately, have long ago been lost or destroyed, and so you try to go back as far as you can. But over the years, printing these elements repeatedly, handling them, unfortunately, changing them along the way for whatever reason, they find that there are frames that have either been torn and consequently taken out and a slug put in instead. So there's ways to go. We always look for an alternate element that might have been made, a copy that might have been made before that damage happened. So there's always that hope. And very often when we're restoring a film, we're rarely, I would say, working from a single element. We're most often working from a melange of several elements, each optimizing that particular part of the film so that we can get the absolutely best, most authentic reproduction of the image.
Okay.
And then at the end of the day,
actually,
yes, we can recreate frames if we need to in a very visual effects type scenario where we can take pieces of surrounding frames and reconstruct the image back to create the missing frames. We did a great deal of that recently we did it for Le Voyage Dans La Lune, which is also, en anglais, is a trip to the moon, of course. We did a lot of it in there, and we did a lot of that replacement of missing frames in when we restored The Invisible Man for Universal recently. So it is possible, and we do it.
Great. Well, you know what? Hold that thought. We're going to take a very quick break, and we'll be right back with Tom Burton, who is the Executive Director of Restoration Services at Technicolor. Hola, this is Brooke Peterson. You're listening to Sweet Life, the weekly show that helps people find and walk their own special path. And today we're talking to Tom Burton, who is the Executive Director of Restoration Services at Technicolor. And we are talking about restoring classic films, or maybe even not so classic. You know, The Little Mermaid is, well, not that old, but it's a classic, I guess. Mr. Burton, you still with us?
I am indeed.
Great. So continuing our conversation, we were talking about basically the process of image restoration and how you do what you do. And I have to say, it sounds incredibly technical and artistic at the same time. Is that true?
It really is. It's a pretty amazing combination of pure art and visual effects and a lot of the regular parts of filmmaking. It's when we're doing a restoration project, it's really very much like the post-production process that would happen on any big major motion picture that's currently finishing today. The process is then the tool sets are all very similar up to the point where you start dealing with image reconstruction and image repair, and then those tool sets are very specialized. There are industry-wide available platforms that are very much like visual effects platforms, Smoke or Inferno or After Effects, things that visual effects artists would know in that world. There are other tool sets like MTI and Digital Vision Phoenix and Pixel Farm, PF Clean, and a lot of software packages that are specifically related to image repair. And then we also have the benefit of having a research and innovation team that is constantly working with us to develop custom solutions and custom platforms for analyzing and repairing esoteric things like image flicker and image stability and finding weird cadences even in video signals and finding dirt and scratches in old film. So we've got a pretty specialized tool set.
Now, I guess with today's technology, you run the risk of making a film too perfect, and where it sort of loses its original historic quality. Do you find yourself having to restrain yourself and hold yourself back?
Absolutely. Restraint is probably the first button on the machine. It just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right.
I would say going back in time about 10 years ago when a lot of the new image repair technology was first hitting the market and first being available by specialized companies, the tendency was to use that atomic device to get rid of that ant colony in your backyard, and unfortunately they went way too far. There was a tendency in this town with image restoration where even the studios said, take all the grain out. Ooh, the grain is bad. Make everything look like a brand new HD captured movie. And that's horribly wrong on so many spiritual, historical, and creative reasons. I mean, the image structure of grain and the density and even some of the gritty integrity of those old films is part of why they're what they are. And when you try to make them a new film, then you violated the trust of the people that have asked you to preserve that element, because your job isn't to make a new film, it's to revitalize or resuscitate that old film, and we like to look at it as saying we want to regenerate that experience as close as possible, that the viewer of that movie sitting watching 1927 Wings in the theater, Paramount's Wings, the first movie to ever win the Academy Award for Best Picture, we want to relive that experience and see it the way that audience saw it for the first time. And anything we do beyond that is out of bounds. It's clipping penalty. Okay, you got to go.
Now, what is your I love all that. What is your favorite part about your job?
Paycheck is no. I should say something spiritual. No, it's it really is a privilege, and it sounds really corny, but it really is a privilege to be entrusted with the vault and the heritage and the legacy of studios like Paramount and Fox and Sony and Universal and Disney, and to have their collaboration in joining them in saving the lives of some of these assets and making them available for future generations. To your point of making them available for people to see that maybe didn't grow up on those films, but as you mentioned in your intro, that are very influential for so many reasons in our culture. So it's cool to play along in that sandbox.
Yeah, I bet it is. And, for future generations, I'm a non-traditional student here at PCC, and I have to say, sometimes I kind of cringe, and I sort of want a little tear falls down the side of my face sometimes when I talk to some of these students and they don't know who Marlon Brando is, or they don't know who, and I'm scared, and it kind of hurts me a little bit. Do you find that the audience's interest is not maintaining a youthful generation interest? Does that make sense?
Well, it's in all fairness, it's tough. I mean, will you be just as disappointed when your kids' generations forget who Justin Bieber is? I don't. He
is not Marlon Brando.
I don't know if it's about that so much as it's about the unfortunate lack of exposure to the general style of filmmaking and the kind of performances. The actors are certainly one thing, but there are very incredible, comparable actors that are working today. There's no question about that. Oh, yeah. I think it's more about how that combination of actor and director and studio philosophy and look of the film, especially when you go back in some of the old black and white films and that incredible film noir stuff, a lot of which was dependent, frankly, on nitrate, on the way nitrocellulose film looked. There is nothing more gorgeous. And is there a shame that more people don't get to see that? Yeah, but that's tough. And those as these films become, it's tough to remonetize them from the studio standpoint, to be able to have a justification to be able to have them on a platform where people can see them. So I guess the more we save them, the more hope there is in the future that they'll be pulled out of the vault and re-exposed.
Right. Now, for any, 16, 18, even 24-year-old person who's just like, well, what? It's an old film. Who cares? I see cooler things now. What would you say to them? What's the value for them?
Well, some of them are just, you could philosophize and say, well, you really should dig the structural integrity of why those are so important to modern filmmaking. But it's beyond that, they're just really cool damn movies. And I think the real justification is step out of the it isn't widescreen full color Tom Cruise HD regalia, but wait, it's something else, and that something else is very cool. It's an incredible take. Movies like Sunset Boulevard, which I think is probably, and I didn't realize this until we started restoring it. I realized that it's my favorite movie, and I didn't realize that before. But it's like the combination of acting, cinematography, directing. The script is probably one of the best scripts ever written, and it's those kind of things that you have to just dive in and go, I don't care if it's an old film or not. This is just a cool, very, very well-structured piece of art and entertainment. Yeah. And if you can sell that, then more people would be taking a look at them.
Yeah. Well, that is one of my all-time favorites as well, actually.
Oh, man.
But, I'm impressed that of all the movies that you, I'm sure, know inside and out, that is your favorite. So I look forward to watching that one again.
We actually just did there is a new Blu-ray release of that movie that is the most authentic version of that movie. And I'll say that 10 years ago, there was another restoration of that movie that maybe went too far in that other story we were talking about of taking out grain and making things look a little too polished.
Right.
This new version is very authentic to the point of researching the exposures that the
nice.
DP used for what looks like underlit scenes, but no, that's exactly what he wanted to do.
Right. How did you find that? Like that's part detective. Now you're a detective.
Well, it is. A lot of it, we do kind of refer to our work as being part archaeology, because a lot of what we have to do is not only research these elements, but you also, when you're doing your job, you're researching what the creative intent of the movie was, so that you can reproduce it. In the case of Sunset Boulevard, I mean, the cinematography, the whole point was this very, very dark and dingy environment of that mansion of the forgotten actress in Beverly Hills, and it's all kind of spooky and dark.
Yeah, Miss Habersham kind of thing.
Yeah, and literally there were tests that were done along the way where they would do exposures, and the lab would come back freaking out, going, "Sorry, I think we ruined your film." And he go, "No, that's exactly what I was looking for. Thanks."
Oh gosh, I wish we could keep going. I have so many more questions. Thank you so much, Tom Burton.
It's my pleasure.
Mr. Burton is a film restoration artist for Technicolor in Hollywood, California, the executive director of Restoration Services, to be exact. Thank you again. In the next half of the show, you've been listening to Sweet Life. I'm Brooke Peterson. You can like us on Facebook by searching Sweet Life Radio Show. Until next time, make it sweet.